الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالحق بشيرا ونذيرا بين يدي الساعة من يطع الله ورسوله فقد رشد واهتدى ومن يعصهما فإنه قد غوى وإنه لا يضر إلا نفسه ولا يضر الله شيئا إن خير الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن خير الأمور عوازمها وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The verse that I recited is from Surah Baqarah, which is the second chapter of Quran, verse number 155. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we shall, and certainly we shall test you with something of fear, hunger, loss of wealth, lives and fruits. But for those who have patience and persevere through these tests, there is good news. فَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made clear that every one of us who believe in Him has to go through certain types of tests. All people will not have the same test. Different people have different types of tests. For some, wealth will be a test. For some, health will be a test. For some, poverty will be a test. For some, illness and sickness will be a test. So whatever comes to us in the form of a test, if we have belief in Allah and in the Quran, we find out a way to deal with it. And deal with it in a way that our Prophet ﷺ and his companions have dealt with it. So today I would like to talk about something that is going on in our society and that is targeted upon Muslims. But most Muslims, the way we are living, we are behaving, it seems that either we want to ignore that phenomena or we are unaware of it. And that is the increasing hatred and bigotry against Islam and Muslims. And this is not just a new phenomenon. This was also present during the time of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. There were people who saw Islam and its simple message as a threat to their vested interest. So they stood against it and they made all sorts of propaganda and they subjected Muslims to all sorts of oppression, tyranny, zulm. As we know the history, the 13 years that Prophet ﷺ and his companions spent in Mecca were full of those. And then when Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina also, the people and the forces that did not like Islam, that hated Islam, they did not leave Muslims to establish a peaceful society over there. And that's why there were so many battles that were fought in the 10 years that Prophet lived in Medina. And against these hatred and bigotry, we also find that in Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comforted the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed such surahs as Surah Al-Kawthar, Surah Wad-Duha, Surah Alam Nashrah, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told the Prophet that whenever truth and the message of God will be present, it will affect people and their vested interests, and they will stand against you. But you have to do your job, knowing that God will protect you. There may be test and tribulation, but if you follow the path, it will lead you, if not in this world, then in the hereafter, definitely with eternal success and comfort. So we are facing a situation that is very alarming. I was just reading a recent report that was released by the Council of American Islamic Relations in January of this year, 2022, the annual Islamophobia report. So first of all, I would like to define what it is. It is a sort of fear in the first place, and then hatred and prejudice towards Islam and Muslims that results in a pattern of discrimination, dehumanization of Muslims by creating a distorted understanding of Islam and Muslims, and by creating a stereotypical image and perception of Islam, leading to animosity both at religious and at cultural and racial and social levels. It is shaped and reinforced by media outlets, think tanks, academicians, as well as political organizations and parties, and far-right elements of the society. And it is funded by charitable organizations, the mainstream charitable organizations and endowments. In its report, CARE identified 1,096 organizations, institutions, and networks that fund the Islamophobia propaganda. And the amount of money that was funded to create this misunderstanding, misperception, bigotry, hatred from 2016 comes to about $1.5 billion, billion with a B, $1 billion. So you can imagine how much money these organizations must have been spending to create that hatred. But when you look at our activity, the way we live in this society, it seems as if most of us are not concerned about it, or think that, well, despite this, nothing is going to happen to us Muslims who are living in the United States. So I would like to give you some historical perspective here. In the 1940s, there was mass incarceration of Japanese Americans. The US military rounded up more than 100,000 people just because they were of Japanese heritage. And these were not immigrants who had recently arrived in the US. Many of them were second and third generation Americans, including some who had just one grandparent who was Japanese. They were held in open-air prisons for years without charge or any idea of when their ordeal would end. So my question is, how did this happen? To get the full perspective, we need to understand what happened in 1890s when tens of thousands of Chinese people came to work in America. They came legally, taking jobs that Americans would not take, and primarily work building railroads and other infrastructure. Even though the Chinese were comparatively small in number, Americans felt afraid of people of a different race, religion, language, and culture. This fear was tapped into by the newspapers and exaggerated, leading to campaigns against the Chinese, including cartoons that displayed them in derogatory terms. The broader American public was made to feel that there was an imminent threat from Chinese American unless they put a stop to their coming or their living in the US. They call this yellow fear. Once the hatred had been fomented, politicians rode the wave of xenophobia to boost their popularity. They banked it on hatred and bigotry, propagating racist views about the Chinese, and people voted them in. In California, a senator ran for office with the motto, "The Chinese must go," and won a landslide, even though at the time Chinese people represented less than 1% of the US population. Laws were enacted that prohibited marriage between Chinese and non-Chinese Americans, and zones were allocated in which Chinese people could live. Then in 1917, the government issued the Chinese Exclusion Act, informally known as the Yellow Act, which effectively banned immigration to America from any countries other than Caucasian ones. The fear that had been fomented against one group, the Chinese, was used to spread fear against another, the Japanese. And in a similar way, may be used against the Muslims. So when the Japanese went to the Supreme Court of America made it legal to arrest a person without any charge and imprison them in a concentration camp simply because one of their grandparents was Japanese. This occurred just one generation ago. We see the same phenomena taking place concerning Muslims and Islam today. Western nations have made Islam a major issue. European parliaments are banning the wearing of niqab and hijab. And just recently, America has banned immigration from several Muslim majority countries that the new administration has lifted. And for example, in Switzerland, they made a law outlining the construction of minarets in a mosque. This is confirmation of the fact that if we ignore this increasing bigotry and hatred, then it concludes at a very devastating result for the community that is targeted. And I'm saying that because in Nazi Germany, in the 1920s, the Jews were dehumanized in the same way that Muslims are being dehumanized today. They were declared to be a fifth column that was looking to destroy the fabric of German society and establish their own laws. Similarly, today, many people in the West believe that unless they stop Muslims, they all seek to establish Sharia law in Western land. The media and politicians make people believe that Muslims are coming to get them. Unless we stop that stereotype and the hatred and fear, we too may witness the final horrifying stage that the Japanese and the Jews experience. We have already seen the stereotyping, the caricatures, and the legislation. What is left? The final stage is rounding people up and doing something physical. And I would like also to draw your attention to what's going on in India today. The rising fascism, the open propagation of violence against Muslims, the lynching, the killing of Muslims, and nothing being done against those people who are perpetrating these crimes. Even the courts, in many cases, let the perpetrators go free. So may Allah forbid something like this from happening, but it's important for us to take certain action, to be active, to be engaging. And inshallah, very briefly in my second part of the khutbah, I'm going to talk about what we Muslims must do in order to prevent this catastrophe to happen. أقول قولي هذا أستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم. So my dear brothers and sisters, there is a religious response to this question. The question about what can we do with the rising hatred and bigotry against Muslims and Islam. The religious response is rooted in strengthening our faith in Allah, our taqwa, the character, the Muslim character being a reflection of Quran, and constantly seeking help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must understand that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was accepted as a truthful person, as a trustworthy person, even before he was assigned by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the messenger, to be Rasulullah. So we have to ask this question to ourselves about our faith, about our Islamic character, about our God consciousness, about our relationship with God and with the people who are around them. If we fail in exhibiting that character, then obviously we cannot expect a strong relationship with God, and we should not expect God's help, because Allah has said in Quran very clearly that Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Allah does not come to help a people who do not make a concerted effort to change their destiny themselves. So the second aspect is that we need to understand that Islam is more than just rituals and theology. There is a social aspect to our religion that requires that we stand up against injustice in our societies. Not injustice just against Muslims, but against anybody, whether that anybody is a black person, or a yellow person, or brown person. And Muslims lag in this miserably. From the earliest days of Islam, the Prophet spoke out against issues like female infanticide, economic injustice, oppression, poverty, hunger. These were moral issues, not theological issues. We need to follow the Prophet's example and take a vested interest in the society around us. Racism, homelessness, and access to health care are all Islamic issues. We don't feel that these are Islamic issues. We feel like that these are the things that some NGOs need to do. And we need to just enjoy building our mosque and spending a lot of money in our weddings and enjoying a good life. This will not continue if we don't wake up. And sadly, for many of us, local issues are not considered Islamic. And fundraising for humanitarian crisis abroad is much easier than trying to raise money for a local cause. It is as if we think that local issues have nothing to do with us, but it is part of our Islamic duty to play an active role in the society we live in and to speak up against injustices, all kinds of injustices. We have to be social activists. Our youth have to be social activists, but our youth will be social activists if our elders will also be active in this. Our mosque will exhibit, our Islamic organizations will show an interest in those issues. Not just simply issuing a statement that, yes, this is the Black History Month, or this is that month. No, but actively participating in all those causes. We must fight the system from within the system, using the system. We need to support local organizations that are fighting for the right of all people who are poor, who are hungry, who need help, who are homeless. These are indeed dire times that we are living in, and history shows us this only too well, that if we are just a mere spectator, these things will come upon us. And just like I would have to sadly share with you that people are asking in India, especially the Indian Muslims are asking, what should we do to stop this genocide that is coming upon us? And I always think that this is like you are asking when the flood waters are flowing above your heads, that how can you save yourself from floods? So my dear brothers and sisters, the purpose of today's khutbah was to create an awakening in me and in all of the listeners and viewers who are participating in this khutbah, and hopefully, inshallah, that you will take this message to others in your community. You will find out in every community there are number of organizations that are actively engaged in social issues, in issues that confront racism, homelessness, poverty, hunger, and you will join hands with those people, because this is as Islamic as going to pray 5 times in your masjid. Believe me or not, if you want, I can give lectures upon lectures proving that, again, this is as Islamic as going 5 times to pray in your mosque. And allow me to say, while concluding this khutbah, that sometimes it becomes even more Islamic to go and help those people, because Allah's Prophet has clearly stated that the one who is not merciful, kind, and concerned about the people around us, about him or her, Allah is not going to be merciful and kind towards him. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد بعدد من صلى وصام اللهم صل على سيدنا ومولانا محمد بعدد من قاد وقام اللهم صل على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى سائر الصحابة والتابعين وعلى عبادك الصالحين اللهم أيد الإسلام والمسلمين اللهم انصر من نصر دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وجعلنا منهم واخذل من خذل دين محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم ولا تجعلنا منهم اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه اللهم ثبتنا على الإسلام اللهم نور قلوبنا بنور الإيمان اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات عباد الله رحمكم الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم ولذكر الله تعالى أعلى وأولى وأعز وأجل وأتم وأحم وأكبر. So inshallah we are going to pray Jummah inshallah. Those of you who want to join me in Jummah, you can follow me. And those who want to pray your Zuhr, you can pray 4 rakat of Zuhr at your own. If you are more than one person, if you are 3 people, you can make a Jama Zuhr prayer. And those who are going to follow me, please follow me. I request Brother Abdul to make the Aqama, inshallah.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. Ashhadu anna la ilaha illallah, ashhadu anna Muhammadar Rasulullah. Hayya ala salah, hayya ala falah. Qad qamat as-salah, qad qamat as-salah. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. La ilaha illallah.
Allahu Akbar. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim. Sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقوم الروح والملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. اللهم أنت السلام ومنك السلام تبارك ربنا وتعالى يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب. ربنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار. ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة أعين واجعلنا للمتقين إماما. رب اغفر وارحم وأنت خير الراحمين. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed, for leading us in this Jummah prayers and your reminder about our responsibility to be active in our communities so that people around us understand who we are and eliminate this environment of hate and misinformation that we have about Islam. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to confront this with wisdom. Of course, on IslamiCity, we have lots of information about this. You can just do a search on Islamophobia, and the report that you just mentioned also, it's available. There's several other reports that were done in the past also, but we cannot be passive in this aspect. We all have to be active, and it's not a responsibility just for few organizations. This is a responsibility for each and every one of us to be active in this area. So thank you again, and inshallah we will see you next month. And for the rest of our audience, thank you for joining us. We'll be back next week, inshallah, at 1 o'clock. Until then, assalamu alaikum.